Okay, I think we are live, Jennifer. Let's sit up straight, present ourselves properly to all the masses who are going to watch this video. I'm really happy to join you. This is about a month or two even later than our last video, Positive Leadership Introduction. And in that video, we started with this idea. We were going to follow you through the course of the year as you are implementing positive leadership for the first time. And also talent to strength, but I don't want to confuse things. But if we have time, we might talk about that as well. But we might not have time because this is a full thing. So my thought was, let's talk about what ended up happening at your retreat. You had it about 2 weeks ago, maybe a little 2.5. So I'd like to hear what you ended up doing for positive leadership. In our last video, you were kind of weighing some different options, trying to like decide how you want to approach it and weave it in. So let's talk about that and what you did, how it went, and then after we get through that, we'll talk about authenticity and prepare you for the next class that you have. So
great.
Let's turn it over to you. Kind of give us a little field report.
Okay, well, in terms of the orientation, I provided the introductory chapter to the group prior to us getting together. So they had homework to do before we met for the first time to familiarize themselves with some of the key ideas behind positive leadership. So I knew that going into it. So I sort of took the less is more approach and really tried to stay away from regurgitating the chapter to everybody. I did have a really simple PowerPoint that had some of the key ideas written down. But we started the conversation with I broke everybody into small groups of like 4 or 5 people, and I had some pictures on my slide of some key leaders throughout history, and I just said, think of someone who's an effective leader and that you've come across in your life and what made them effective, or who was not an effective leader and why. And so I just started off by allowing them to discuss that for about 15 minutes or 20 minutes, which was great because they were just starting to get to know each other too. So that in itself was a nice team building exercise for the group. And then we just shared, everyone was talking about a boss they knew or a friend they knew that exhibited some really great qualities. And that was great because what we heard a lot of was, well, this person was charismatic and this person was strong-willed, or this person was very patient. And so that moved right into the discussion about what leadership really is.
Right.
And so we talked about, some of the key questions outlined in the book. And again, so it was really just kind of throwing back to the group the questioning and allowing them to really create the conversation instead of me saying, well, per positive leadership, this is what leadership is and is not. But we sort of moved into the conversation about leadership really not being a trade or a role that we can assume, but really something really fluid that happens between people. And then from there, I moved into showing one of your suggested videos, which was the Indian movie, little boy moving the log.
Yeah, the big old tree.
The tree, yeah. And people loved that video. They just felt really inspired by it. They loved it, the music, everything about it. They just loved it. So that produced a lot of great discussion about what social force is. And I think at that point I did break the group again I made everybody get up and move to different groups. And then we talked about a time when you experienced social force or that you saw social force in action. And again, just let them talk for another 15 minutes or so. And then we got up and shared what we heard. And then that moved into some of the more in the weeds stuff in the book about, obligatory efforts versus discretionary efforts. And becoming more of a technician in our positive leadership rather than an operator. But really, I didn't really do any super crafted group exercises. It was really just like letting them discuss the the key ideas together as a group and then sharing it, and just really kept it simple. But there was no lack of conversation. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to fill an hour and a half, and we absolutely filled an hour and a half, no problem. So it went really well. So I guess that's my less is more approach, went really well. And I think that's really going to become easier now as we move into the capacities to really say, okay, you did the reading. Tell me what you think. So yeah, it's really easy to implement. It's not.
That's great. Yeah. I've been writing down some questions as you were describing that, and just some comment points. But before I get into any of that, I thought it'd be interesting to ask you, so going into the retreat versus now coming out of that retreat, how, what was the difference for you in terms of how you felt about positive leadership, or any uncertainty you might have felt, or any of that?
Yeah. Well, going into the retreat, there was that level of nervousness and not feeling very confident, and feeling as though I had to really learn this and teach it. I had to be this expert in this theory and idea and this framework.
Yeah.
So leading up to the retreat, I probably read the introductory chapter 50 or 60 times, just trying to comb through and just absorb as much as possible. And coming out of it, I'm realizing that, of course, you need to be familiar with the material, and you should read it and you should live it. So you should experiment with the field guide, but you don't have to be an expert.
Yeah.
This is more of you're presenting the material, and you're letting the group sort of own it.
Yeah.
And you're creating sort of a journey for them that they can take. So my feeling going into our second group together, where we'll focus on authenticity, is just one of ease. I'm feeling really comfortable and almost excited to see what they're going to say and how they're going to absorb the first capacity. So
that is so great. So I understand you got some great coaching before going into the retreat.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Don't forget the guy's name.
No, but I do want to talk about that point, because you did it so well. You let yourself be a learner instead of feeling that pressure to be an expert. And
yes.
And did that? It sounds like that helped. That mindset allowed, I don't know, the audience to receive you in a way that you were not there to lecture to them or disagree with their views of leadership, but that you were creating a learning environment together to explore together. And it sounds like, my impression is, they actually treated it that way. They did treat it like they were co-learners exploring this topic together.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a mindset for me that shifted along the way through our coaching. Because like I said, at first I felt like I needed to be the expert. But once I let that go, and I just said, I'm going to present what I know and what's here, and let them do the rest, that's really what worked. Yeah, so I have this metaphor. I don't know if I ever shared it with you. I've shared it with others before, but I view facilitating as like playing pinball. Those old pinball machines where you launch the ball and it kind of goes up and bounces off the bumpers, and then eventually comes down and you got to flip it, to keep the ball in play. Yeah. And that being a facilitator is like playing pinball. The more you're working the flippers, the less effective you're being, the less points you're racking up. You want to get the ball up there and bouncing off the bumpers, and your participants are the bumpers, and the more that the ball is more like the questions or the topic that you're discussing, and the more it bounces off them, and the less you're working the flippers, the more points you're racking up, the better your score. And I feel like a lot of us, I personally feel this way, where if I'm not feeling like I'm working, then I feel like I'm not contributing value. Right.
But that's not true. That's kind of my ego in a positive way. I mean, my ego wants to do a good job and all of that, but it would get in the way if I controlled the ball and try to direct the ball And what you did is you open it up for what really would qualify as dialogue. Dialogue meaning flow. It means flow of meaning among people. And as long as it doesn't get into debate, where participants debate with one another, that's awkward and not the kind of class environment you want to create. But you're creating that dialogue and that flow of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of questions. Do you feel like the participants actually read the material? Because I know that's a concern. Participants are busy, you're giving them this thing, they got to trust you to read it and that it's worth their time. So, at the very beginning is when you're really trying to set that expectation that they read the material. We're not spoon feeding the material to you.
Right. In my case, I did. I felt very confident that everyone had read it and they were prepared to discuss it. If you look at the makeup of my class, not to get into StrengthsFinder, but I think I have like 8 or 9 learners, and I have a bunch of responsibilities. So I kind of knew that I had a group that was going to be prepared. But I could tell, too, because I went through a process of creating ground rules with them. And one that actually came from the group was to do their homework. And it came from them that, show up and do what you're supposed to do.
That's phenomenal. So you actually spent time in the retreat to kind of set some ground rules. And how did you do that? What was your process? Did you share some and then have them contribute, or did it all come from them? Or
yeah, that's exactly what I did. I presented a few that I find have worked in the past for groups that I've facilitated. And I put them on a slide and said, these are the 3 I'd like to recommend and propose.
Do you remember any of those?
Yeah, one was what happens here stays here. So kind of creating that safe environment where people can share without feeling, unsafe. The other one was contribute respectfully. And the third is have fun. So I always say, if you're not having fun or this isn't providing for you what your expectations are, then I'm telling you now, it's fine for you to tell me what could be done differently, that your feedback's a gift. So we're here together, let's have fun.
That's great.
And then of course I said, is everyone okay with these? If these are off the mark or you don't feel comfortable with them, we can take them off the table right now. And then they started contributing. So that's sort of how I set it up. And
so they said, everybody do their homework, and that coming from them is fantastic. What else? Any others stick out?
Oh, I think one other one that I propose is showing up, really being present when you're here. So, obvious things like getting off your phone and, when you're here, be here.
That's great.
I'm trying to think of other ones. I think someone said something like, let's not have a Robert's Rule of Order type of feel to the environment.
Yeah.
I think that's off limits. Let's talk and share and let it be informal and comfortable, kind of the feeling of we're getting away from work for a day, even though this is kind of work, but let's have it be that retreat feel.
Yeah. And that's kind of cool too. Like you could use something like that when you talk about authenticity. You can refer back to the ground rule. Did you guys like the ground rule that we don't treat it like Robert's Rules of Order and very formal here? Why? Because it allows us to be authentic. Or I said that weird, authentic. Or you could talk about, did you guys feel that there was authenticity at our retreat? And if so, what are some examples of that? And they may say, when they say, oh, the way you facilitated us, Jennifer, where you didn't hold yourself out as an expert, you let us know, you were learning along with us, that, and then you could use that. And I think that makes for really good facilitation, is to let the group reflect on their own experience. It makes them kind of psychologically own this thing they're going together, and it builds a sense of community. So when you get to the community building chapter, you could even say, how did we build community in this class? What are some examples? And so you could use the experience they're having as a laboratory for the concepts.
Right.
So you had a discussion on effective or ineffective leaders, and it sounded like you made the provision, even though you showed them famous leaders on the screen, you actually asked them to use leaders that they know in their personal
Right.
life. And I think
Well, I
really
guess I
good.
didn't. I wasn't that specific. I think I said a leader that stands out for you,
Oh,
or
okay.
that. But
Good.
most of the examples that were coming up were people that they had a personal relationship with, or they knew on a personal level.
And I would encourage anybody watching this to actually even go that far to say someone you've personally been affected by. That increases that storytelling among the participants. Because if we use a famous leader and then everybody has opinions about this leader, I heard some
Right.
commentator, talking about Mother Teresa in a very negative way, that she was an egomaniac and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, I never heard that. But I'm trying to imagine if you use a public leader that everybody knows, there could be different views on him or her.
Right.
So, so I like having it be personal, and then that person will actually speak from their own experience, whereas I can't speak from my own experience about some of these famous leaders. Let's see, the tree video, right? Like that, like when you were presenting that, I was like, oh, that must have been a nice little surprise that you weren't expecting, that video would engender such positive like comment, or such a spark for conversation.
Yep.
So
In fact, I had a couple of class members ask for the link, and they were actually two class members that work in education. And they said, I'd love to show this to my class of 6th grade girls, like this video, to show them what leadership really is. So there was a lot of requests for your materials. I know we're not talking about StrengthsFinder, but like your coin model.
yeah.
So people were eager to have the materials and to use it. So I just think it really resonated with them.
Yeah, and for anybody wondering, like, where is that tree video? It's let's see if I can do a screen share here. Share screen. Okay. So I think I'm sharing this here. This is the website. So when you log in to the website, let's see, you log in and you select leader. Then it takes you to these sections, and I bet you it's going to be under the maybe introduction.
Yes.
Here, and then then there's resources for the introduction or the retreat. So they have this guy, the dancing man video, which
people were familiar with that one, actually, Adam. A couple of people said to me, have you seen the one with the dancing guy? And I said, oh yeah.
Yeah, so that's why this one here, it's called India's New Anthem. This video, it communicates the same message, but it isn't one that they would have seen. So this is the tree video here, and then there's some other videos in here with they're missing descriptions, so I think I need to add some descriptions about why some of these videos, so that you guys can know what I had in mind when I listed that as a potential resource. So that's great. So that's where you'll find the stuff for the introduction. Then if you go back to this, page here, what we're going to talk about is stuff that you would find if you click here on authenticity. And so under authenticity, you'll see the chapter, the field guide, and both the participants will have access to both of those when they log into the system. What they won't have are the PowerPoint, which we're going to look at the PowerPoint here now. We're going to go into that for authenticity. Did you use any of the PowerPoint slides for the introduction?
I used a couple of your graphics. So I used the social force diagram. Sort of used that just as like a closing slide. So after we were done talking about it and we braked, I had that up on the screen just as a nice backdrop. And I think I used the diagram where it shows the conversion of authority.
Yeah, and leadership.
I used that. Yeah, I think I used that. And that was it.
Good. And that's perfect. That's exactly how the PowerPoints are meant to be used. not to use the whole PowerPoint. You wouldn't have time, and it would feel like a lecture. If you
Right.
did. So pick and choose those things that you wanted to bring out and talk about. So that's exactly how it's meant to be used. So in here, I guess I only have one video under the authenticity chapter, but it's fantastic. So I think if you share this, Mr. Rogers' video testifying before the Senate subcommittee, it's so good. I every time I watch it, I just really, really enjoy it because you see what authenticity, the effect it has on others. So there's that. You have the PowerPoint. You have a summary, a 2-page summary that then you could give to guest speakers. Do not give it to your participants, or they won't read the book.
We have 2 mayors coming in. 2 of our key older industrial cities in my region, Fall River, New Bedford. We have both mayors coming in during our economic development day when we'll be talking about authenticity. And I shared the summary with them and gave them some questions that the class was going to be thinking about. And, said, if you feel so inclined, to speak to this as well when you're talking about regional economic development, that would be great. And I shared it also. We have a panel of economic development leaders that are going to be part of the day. And so they have it as well.
You're just hitting home runs. That's fantastic. You're using the tools. That's great. So yeah, that gets me excited to kind of move into talking about authenticity now. So before I go into the PowerPoint, let me just ask you some of your thoughts or questions, any hesitations or interests that you want to focus on as we talk about this. That's a weird question. So
no, let's dive in.
Great. All right. So I'm going to go to my screen share again. And this time we're going to look at my desktop. We're just going to share that. And I have the PowerPoint pulled up. I just downloaded it from the website, just like anybody else would do if they logged in to use this, any of you people facilitating positive leadership. So I'm going to start here. And again, these slides are meant for you to basically use as you see fit. So the first thing is, this is the diagram you were mentioning that you used in your orientation where you wanted to kind of see the whole thing. And this diagram basically is just kind of weaving together the 3 ideas of self, which is the individual, you as a person, what you bring. And I love StrengthsFinder as a tool for really giving some language for helping them understand themselves. So that's a real powerful tie-in. We're not talking about StrengthsFinder in this, but I want to weave it in because it is such a part of what you're doing, and I think it would be an enhancement for any program doing this, such a value add for the members. So the self, and then the community, which is what we're all about, the larger community, making it stronger. This isn't a business leadership program. It's not a military leadership program. It's a leadership program about us and our community and what's going on. And then in between self and in between community is this idea of leadership. And what is that? And what does it mean? And everybody has ideas, and there's a bazillion books on it, and everybody wants to be a leader, and everybody knows that being a leader is good. But what does it really mean? And what we're talking about it is in terms of social force. And this is a weird idea. It's not really anywhere else. I did a Google search on social force about 10 years ago, and maybe 8, and there was hardly anything there on this topic. And but it was the way that the concept of leadership framed itself in my mind, that it's social force, and that it's not something that's in a person. You talked about in your retreat where the participants were naming these qualities, these traits, being visionary, being strong-willed, and yet at the same time, someone could be not strong-willed and be an effective leader, and someone could not be visionary and be an effective leader. So what is it? And it's that each person has social force. They have the potential to mobilize and influence the people around them. question for you, Jennifer. How did people respond to that idea of social force? I'm always curious about that because, you know, like I said, it's not something we talk about all the time.
Yeah, there wasn't any pushback. You know, people seem really open to the idea. I think they received it really well, and they're really just curious about, okay, how do you create that social force?
Great.
You know, we didn't go there in the retreat, so it was just very on the surface of, you know, it stopped there. But yeah, no, and I think the video really helped too to demonstrate that what it is.
That's great, because yeah, that's the point of the video. Here's these kids, they're not an authority. They're not talking or yelling or using any, you know, communicating through whatever personal traits they have. It was they took actions, positive actions, and it evoked positive reactions from the people watching this. And so that really did visually communicate this. I think I should do more in terms of like helping people talk about social force more. So maybe we could do, maybe on another video, we can even carve out some time to talk about social force. But the main point here, and what I want to remind people when we're talking about the capacities, so like in this case, authenticity, you're going to go into talking about authenticity, to tie it back to social force. So for example, does someone have more social force when they're authentic or inauthentic? And I think clearly, you know, I ask it this way: are you more available to someone's influence if you view that person as authentic versus if you view that person as inauthentic? Right. What they say doesn't match what they really do, or you get the sense that they're not really being forthcoming. That makes you hold back a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's the way I would tie this in. In each of these capacities, these little icons are for each capacity. So the authenticity icon is this man looking in a mirror. And so this icon is about how it affects social force. Then when you go through, the next one is purpose or resilience, advocacy or resilience, community building, and reason, how each of these amplify one's social force. So by the end of your program, there's sort of like 7 dials or levers, like I'm picturing like a switchboard or something, where you could dial up your authenticity, dial down, you know, resilience, or find that right combination of what's needed in the situation from you as the leader, as somebody wanting to exert social force. Yeah. So I'm glad you showed that model. And then this model is at the beginning of all the PowerPoints because I want to bring people back to this general map, you know, and show them where we are in the process. So here's a blown up version of authenticity. That leadership begins with the self, and that authenticity is all about the self. So I'm just going to talk about some concepts here, and like, you know, feel free to add any questions or thoughts for how you might communicate this. But another aspect in the tool bag of positive leadership is always talking about purpose, even within the authenticity chapter or the other chapters. What's the purpose of this chapter, and what are the desired outcomes of the chapter? So this is me communicating to people that, why did I write this chapter? I wanted to increase your understanding of authenticity, its role in being an effective leader, and its ability to amplify social force. So that's the purpose of the chapter. And as I'm writing the chapter, I might go off on tangents and then try to really come back. Wait a minute, what's the purpose? That's what purpose does. And next month we'll talk about purpose more, but purpose is part of everything we do, which is one of the lessons of purpose. And then purpose always implies an outcome. What does it look like when that purpose is fulfilled? And so this is where you might get a little more specific. And so specifically, I would hope that this chapter prompts reflection in the reader on their authentic self. And another outcome is I want to inspire them to choose actions that increase their capacity for being authentic, that, you know, that they give more thought to authenticity and that they strive to be more authentic. I was talking to a leader of a huge company. I don't want to say the name. I don't want the person told me this in confidence, but he told me that he had decided to leave the company. Over the next year, he was going to leave. He He had acquired some interest and funding for a project he wanted to launch. And he just said, I'm an entrepreneur. I don't really fit in with the corporate culture. I don't do politics that well. And so once he made the decision, he began to, just lead in a different way and talk in a more candid way. And as a result, it just generated excitement in the organization such that his board came to him and said, look, these things that you say you're wanting to do, we're opening up the coffers so that you could go forward and do them. And he said, that changed my mind. I decided at that point I was not leaving the company, and that I don't ever picture leaving, because it was the power for him to be more authentic, to go from feeling like he didn't really fit to actually feeling like what he wanted, what was his true self, was supported and endorsed and motivating to other people. And I just think that that's just an example of what happens when we become more authentic, but we're afraid to be authentic because, well, for a lot of reasons. There's a lot of things that keep us from being authentic. In our warm-up, I was telling you that story. I'm just going to say it again because I think it's really interesting, that a mentor of mine was on an airplane, and he was in first class, and the flight attendant brought him some wine, and he really liked the wine. And so he caught the flight attendant again and said, what manner of wine is this? Where did it come? What is it? And she told him a name he never heard of. And he just nodded to her like, oh, yeah, I know that one. And then he kind of felt like foolish, because it was like, what did he think was going to happen to say that he knew this wine that he never heard of? What was the effect he was hoping for? What compelled him to basically lie or misrepresent himself as knowing this wine? And he was playfully saying, did I expect she would go back into the cabin with the other flight attendants and say, oh, I just met this such an urbane, refined gentleman who knew so much about wine, and that, of course not. That's ridiculous. Like, why would the flight attendant wouldn't care whether he knew the wine or not knew the wine? But it was just that pressure that we feel, when somebody says, oh, and they reference a movie or they reference a book or whatever, and you don't want to say, oh, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never heard of that. Enlighten me, share with me. We feel compelled to say, oh yeah, I know that. I know everything about, I'm an autodidact and what's the term for the people who knows like everything about a polymath. I know everything about everything. There's a lot of pressure on us to do that. And that's what this chapter is about, is kind of like questioning that, those forces that compel us to not be authentic. And the cost is high. I mean, like this may be a little over the top for some people, but I think of it like this is our one life, on our deathbed. And there's actually studies on this that ask people, what's your greatest regrets? You could research this. It's fascinating. At the end of life, what are people's biggest regrets? And they're all basically authentic based. They're like, I wish I would have expressed more how I felt about the people that mattered to me. I wish I would have lived my own life instead of what people expected from me. Basically, I wish I would have lived more authentically is really what we can encapsulate these regrets. And so I think it's a big topic, an important topic, and it's going to be a lot of your participants' favorite capacity. And that's always interesting for me. Participants will all have different favorite capacities, and authenticity is usually one of the leaders. And I always root for the underdog. So when we get to some of them that are less commonly mentioned as a favorite capacity, I'm really going to root for them and try to really add more oomph to it. And mainly I'm thinking of reason, because I think reason, it's one of my favorites, and it's not mentioned as often as one of the participants' favorites. But I want to change that because I think we need a resurgence of reason to see the world as it really is. All right. So. And then I always like to include quotes. I'm big on quotes. A friend of mine just sent me an app today that I'm really excited about. That's all about, building your own personal collection of quotes. I have 5 or 6 pages of just authenticity quotes that I've never done anything with. I just collect them, and I should probably put those on the website, because I just love.
This is a good one.
What's that?
This is a really good one.
Yeah, this is good. What we can keep ourselves so busy, fill our lives with so many diversions, stuff our heads with so much knowledge, involve ourselves with so many people and cover so much ground that we never have time to probe the fearful and wonderful world within. And by middle life, most of us are accomplished fugitives from ourselves. Wow.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
true.
So, you could use a quote to prompt discussion at tables. You can give each table a different quote and they talk about it and then they share their quote and key things from it. Just another idea for an activity. Less is more approach. Basically some reviews of some things we covered last time. The distinction between authority and leadership, very important. I'm so glad you covered that in your retreat. The difference between obligatory effort and discretionary effort. I give more effort to people I believe in and that I know are real, and I hold back and I only do what's obligated of me when it's somebody who I don't really trust or know their motivations or feel like they're authentic. How do we distinguish between operator and technician? Real quick, Jennifer, how do those terms resonate for people?
Actually, looking back, we quickly went over the operator and technician.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why that happened is because it actually came up in the beginning discussion a lot, even though we hadn't put terms on it. So in the beginning discussion, we had talked about what makes an effective leader versus an ineffective leader. And so we talked a lot about, some of the things, bosses or colleagues you worked with that, how they become reactive when things aren't going their way, and just that sort of the many traits of an operator, kind of came up already when we were talking about effective and ineffective leaders.
Right.
So when I got to this part, it was almost like going over things again. We just hadn't put those two technical terms on them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And so,
but they took to the ideas very well. I mean, there was no pushback at all.
Good. Yeah. Just a couple of things on this. One is you can't get everything all in the retreat. So as you go into these other capacity discussions, feel free to refer back to a point like operator and technician. Basically, one of my mottos is, by the time you're sick of saying it is about the time people are starting to hear it. So there's a lot of little features within, I don't know why I did this gesture. I don't know, from my old breakdancing days. But there's a lot of little intricacies in positive leadership that, you're going to experience this where next year you're going to make connections you didn't make this year.
Right.
And so for your participants, a lot is going to glaze past them. But, operator versus technician, just real quick, is my way of talking about how I don't want to use the term good or bad leader or even effective or ineffective leader. I wanted it to be less personal and less of an insult. I wanted to say, you know what? You're either an operator or a technician, and you can't be a technician in every arena. A technician like of computers is a whole lifetime of learning. A technician of cars is a whole complicated, specified set of knowledge. And yet we're expected to be technicians as parents, and technicians in running our household and home maintenance, and technicians of, being a board member, and, it's a lot to ask. So I just want to say to people, if you want to become a technician of leadership, you're going to have to dedicate yourself to learning more about how the whole system of human interaction operates, the system of social force operates. Mm-hmm. And then when you do, what technicians have that operators don't have is a range of moves to get the results you want. And also just to point out the obvious fact that I could call myself a car technician, but the minute I open the hood of the car, you're going to recognize that I'm not. I could call myself a technician of computers, but the minute I start trying to fix a problem, you're going to realize I don't know much. And I think the same is true with leaders. We call people leaders, but why? What technical capacity did they have that earned that title? And so that's kind of the point here, and that we could grow in our technical capacity in any arena. We're humans, we're smart, we're capable. I can, like right now, I have a goal I want to get more fit, but I don't know anything about nutrition. So, I should become more of a technician of it if it's what I want. And same with leadership. Anyway, social force should be brought up every month, I think, referring to it, that term, and maybe exploring different aspects of it. And then what is the relationship between the 7 capacities and social force? And the relationship is this: each capacity, like authenticity, is about amplifying your social force. When you are in that moment of accountability and you want to make something happen, if you could be authentic, it brings with it advantages that help compel other people to get on board with you. Mm-hmm. And then when you get to purpose, how does purpose increase social force? And then advocacy, how does that increase social force? And each one does a different thing to amplify the social force in different ways. So, all right. So what I do, and this is at the beginning of every chapter, I just like people, and you could use these self-assessments in your class, or you could have people do it silently, or you could use it not at all. But I want to tell people that these self-assessments are also an outline for the chapter. They almost follow the flow of what I'm talking about in the chapter itself. But I just think it's kind of cool, like the way I do it is I just go through the questions and I have the people kind of mentally think through it themselves. So I'll say something like, I fulfill roles. So I'm going to cover up the scale, I think, but it's all on a scale of 1 through 7. 7 being absolutely 100% yes, 1 being no, very little, and most people are somewhere in the middle. So to rate your answer to this question, I fulfill various roles in my life by being essentially the same person in each role. Now, that's not to say that you should be the same person in each role no matter what. I mean, when you're a parent, it's going to be different than when you're hanging out with your college or high school friends. You're going to be a different person. But essentially, are you the same person? Do you have the same values? Or are you a different person in different venues? There's this guy, I just heard about this report in the news. This guy, he's a NAACP representative, and there was some issue, I forget what it was, and he commented on it. And then as the reporter, a female reporter, walked away, he made a comment to one of his friends about her anatomy, leave it at that. And but another newspaper outlet was recording him and picked this up. And so here's this guy talking about equality and, diversity and respecting people. And then, the very next second turns around and makes a comment that was not really representative of seeing people for who they are,
Right.
So just a question, or just something to think about. Oh, wow, with this one person, I can't be with myself. In most other areas of my life, I'm this person, but I feel like confined when I'm around this person or in this situation. It just sparks some questions, some thinking about who am I and why am I authentic in some situations and not others? Anyway, so that's one statement. The next one, I'm comfortable resisting pressure to conform. So just a statement to think about. There's people who are people pleasers. I've heard that term a lot in the last week with different people in different settings where people say, I'm a people pleaser. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, sometimes those are the most likable and best people to work with. But there's also, when they say I'm a people pleaser, it comes with a little bit of regret. Like, why is it that I can't say no and resist? Why can't I just say what's true for me? I want to make a point here. I'm cognizant of our time, but I can't resist this. I was listening to a lecture the other day from a humanities professor, and he talks about topics and how they played out over history. So he's talking about conversation. And how is conversation in our modern age different than how conversation was viewed in earlier cultures? And he does this with other things like letter writing and education, and how was education viewed way back in antiquity versus today. But with conversation, he said something very interesting. In American culture, our status can change very quickly. You know, like we could go from rags to riches, from riches to rags. I mean, you know, we could be on top of the world one day, and then the next minute be outcasted or fired or something. Our status can change a lot based on how people view us. Well, this wasn't always the case. In other cultures, you were pretty much born into your station in life. So if you said the right thing to the right person, it wasn't going to change your status. If you said the wrong thing to the wrong person, you weren't suddenly going to be like going from a merchant to a peasant or whatever. And so in those cultures, you would say it would just be more part of the way you were raised to just say what's true for you. You weren't so worried about consequences. But in our culture, we're way more worried about the consequences because there are so many consequences. Our status can change relatively frequently. I think that's a very, very powerful point about authenticity and worth talking about, even with your cohort. I mean, when I've only brought that up in conversation about 5 or 10 times, and every time I've done it, people like really like it. They think about that. They're like, "Yeah,
yeah,
makes much sense."
It does.
So I'm aware of the gaps between how others see me and how I see myself. And some people are just totally oblivious. They just think, oh, you see me the way I see me. But there really are like 4 people in a conversation. There's the way I see me. There's the way I see you. There's the way you see me. And there's the way you see you. And then there's ways that you see me seeing myself. Like, oh, you must think you're pretty, this or that. I mean, there's just all this stuff going on. This is where you can weave in stuff of like emotional intelligence really fits well with authenticity. The very first aspect of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. And we'll get into that too. I better speed along here. So other people feel comfortable being themselves around me. Just something to think about. Do they, you know, some people have heard, oh, I'm intimidated by you. And they're like, why would anybody be intimidated by me? They don't think that way. But yet there's something about them that's intimidating. Are they aware of that? And is there something they can do to reduce that? There's some leadership philosophies from the 60s and 70s that were about amplifying your intimidation factor, elevating your status. I can tell stories about that. Just here in Tulsa, there's a company that when they sold the company, the new people who bought it, they left one of the offices the same because it was very interesting. In this office, the same furniture and everything. The guy who owned the company was a man of pretty short stature physically. And when they went into the office, the chair that on the other side of the desk, so somebody would come and talk to him, the legs were sawed off. So the chair was lowered to the ground. There were like stuffed animal heads on the wall, just, to kind of create this environment of intimidation.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I reliably assess situations and relationships that allow or inhibit me to be my true self. So I'm just aware. I'm aware of where I could be my true self and where I feel like I can't. And I got to project a different demeanor or face. I consistently look at myself for opportunities to improve and create action steps. I think it's very important that we continually improve. And very important for leadership to be more and more effective. And my current life situation accurately reflects my true self. Very interesting. Like if people really kind of look at it and think about it. One program that uses positive leadership, the program director shared with me a letter from one of the participants, and he said it was a thank you letter to the class because he, as a result of going through the positive leadership model, but not just the positive leadership model. I mean, he was in a place of reevaluating his life, and he did. He he sold his business and did different things. Yeah. To get that more accurate reflection of my true self, and my life reflects who I am. So another thing from the introduction chapter that might have been missed is kind of how I quote unquote define leadership, and what I say the essence of positive leadership is that when I take actions that evoke positive reactions from others. Mm-hmm. And we talk about the word positive, and that it doesn't just mean feel good, it means forward moving, greater, the sum is greater than the parts, that kind of thing. Because sometimes what's positive may feel negative at first. We need to make cutbacks so we can survive. But if we survive, then we can grow, and those kinds of things can be positive even though they don't feel positive. So I mean it more in a more of a mathematical sense. So what's not, let's understand authenticity. Let's talk about what is not authenticity. So what makes you say someone is not being authentic? This would be good discussion. So when you say someone's not authentic, what is it that's making you say that? What impact does it have on you when you believe when someone is not being authentic? How do you respond? What effect does it have on you? Because the way it affects you will likely affect other people the same way. What reasons might someone have for not being authentic? Because I think there is a lot of reasonable, natural reasons that people aren't being authentic. So those are just some discussion questions. Here, I make some distinctions that I think are pretty interesting. And this I learned from a consulting group called Conversant, and some guys that I've learned from and have been very, very influenced by my thinking. And so they talk about pretense, and it's a state of not what we say does not match who we really are. So it could be outright lying, but it could also just be for the sake of social, getting along, not making waves. You just don't want to say, the truth because it's not really going to benefit anybody. So it could be any of those things, but whatever the case is, we are pretentious when we're afraid of the consequences for being authentic. We imagine consequences of, if we said this person would be offended, or they wouldn't like me. We imagine bad things would happen, and so we don't say what we would really want to say. We don't say what's true for us. And it's not a decision, it's a reflex. It's a fight or flight response. So the opposite of that would be sincerity, which is a good word. We like people who are sincere, but the way Conversant talks about it is that people are sincere when they say what's true for them in a way that that there's no arguing with them. It's like they take the facts and their opinions and they merge them together and they hand it off as the truth. And we hear it a lot in our political discourse, the punditry that goes on, when really the answers for solving so many problems aren't really all one way or all one another way, but you hear this pomposity, this obstinance of this is the way it is, and I'm telling you the truth, and and if you disagree with me, we're gonna fight, and but what's sincere, so I'm saying what I really think when I'm being sincere, but here's why it's not authentic always, is sometimes I believe that's who I am, but if I really searched myself and understood myself better, there's a deeper truth that isn't who I am. So I could mean my words in the moment, but it doesn't mean I am being authentic or telling the truth. There could be things I don't know about myself, or that I haven't pondered before, that would be that would make what I say be different. I would say something different if I was truly being authentic. But I don't know those things that I don't know or that I haven't explored. So I'm sincere, but it doesn't mean I'm telling you the truth, or that's the only way to see it. Mm-hmm. And so authenticity is when someone says what's true for them in a way that also allows other people to say what's true for them. So here's my view on this, but what do you think? I had somebody, a coworker of mine, asked me this question that's become my favorite question. In an email the other day, I was explaining something to her, and she didn't quite see where I was coming from, but she didn't disagree. She did disagree, but the way she said it was, "Tell me what you're seeing." And because I knew she disagreed with me because I know her well, and I know, but she was holding out for a bigger truth that she was available to, that she was recognizing that she didn't have the whole truth, and that her disagreement was just from her perspective, but not from the way I was asking it. She was inviting me to be authentic. It was really powerful for me. It was social force on me. Her asking that question caused me to respond in a way that was more positive, more valuable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And anything that I've covered so far, we got about 15 more minutes. I'm going to try to maximize it, but I just want to see if you had any thoughts or questions on this. I think I didn't necessarily communicate the difference between authenticity and sincerely as cleanly as I normally would.
Well, it's a little blurry, the two terms. I kind of see sincerity as it's like your truth, right? So when you talk about talent to strength, not to get into that realm, but you talk about your self-world, right? So I kind of think of the sincerity as, this is my self-world, and I'm so emotionally driven by this idea or thought. So it's my truth. And then I see authenticity as sort of that validation,
That's great.
And also, like you said, creating a space for someone else to be sincere in a way that's safe.
Oh, I so want to talk about self-world. I'm so glad you brought that up. And that's something that I talk about more in this talent to strength material, but it absolutely fits here. This idea that each of us has our self-world. You know, there's my stream of thoughts as I'm maybe driving or taking a walk, and I have this stream of thoughts that are all going on in my head, and I don't really know I'm having them unless you were to stop and ask me, you know, Adam, what are you thinking? And then at that point, I'd have to retrace, like, what was I thinking, you know, and then try to put it into words or even remember how I got from one thought to another thought to another thought. And then even if I do that, then the problem is, do I really want to reveal what's in that self-world? Like, because sometimes there's things in there, there's some weird thoughts that I'm like, where did that thought come from? Or I would be embarrassed to say, or it's just goofy, it's just weird, it's just, or embarrassing or whatever. And so, yes, I think sincerity is honestly reporting what's in your self-world, but that authenticity would be open to exploring other people's self-world and increasing kind of like the possibilities that I hadn't imagined until I found out your self-world and what was in there, and then created new ideas and understandings that lead to better possibilities. So we'll leave it there and move on. But I think that's a really, really great connection. So 4 ways authenticity increases social force. One is that people have a visceral response to authenticity. I don't know what it is. I call it a BS detector, but we just sort of sense. And sometimes we're completely fooled, you know? We're like, whoa, that person totally blindsided me. But if we know someone's being fake, you know, we'll dig in and we'll protect ourselves a little bit. Some people are really good at faking it. Another point, credibility rises to the degree one is viewed as authentic. So the more authentic you view me, the more willing you are to, you know, hear what I'm saying and be open to my influence. Authentic people foster authenticity in others. And this is something called the dyadic effect, that my self-disclosures will trigger your self-disclosures. There's sort of a reciprocity. Or if I protect myself, if I'm kind of closed, you would reciprocate with that. And so it's a very interesting aspect. And so you're modeling authenticity for others. Maybe in an environment where nobody says the truth, the elephant in the room, and nobody's talking about it. Authenticity increases your level of engagement and other people's level of engagement. When I know I'm doing something for real and for true purpose or true cause, or, you know, I'm more, it comes back to that discretionary effort I'm willing to give to something if they're authentic. So, then this is when I show the Mr. Rogers video of authenticity in action, and then you could have some discussion about it. Like, you'll see those 4 points come across in this video. So tease it off nicely, and then some other thoughts. I love this idea of authenticity. I know a lot of other people I talk to do. It's just really important to them. But when I read about authenticity, I'm often disappointed because the definitions are pretty superficial about it. Being who you truly are. Yes, I wouldn't disagree with that, but it doesn't give me enough. I want more. So is there more to it? And so I talk about 4 elements of authenticity, and this is the way I break it down. And this is where you could spend more of the time in it, is first talk about self-knowledge. The Greek philosophers would say, know thyself, you know, Plato or Socrates. That was part of his, one half of his dictum, which was, the other half was, then you should accept yourself. So know thyself, and the translation would be, and choose thyself. You know, knowing thyself, okay, but then when I see things that I don't like about myself, I want to reject those things. My ego wants to protect me from them. But really, how can we come to accept ourselves? And, you know, without doing this, accept yourself in a way that is like, well, that's who I am, take it or leave it. You know, so if you've got a flaw or something that really diminishes other people, or is negative or whatever, you know, accept that about yourself, know that that's true, but then strive to develop yourself, always wanting to become a better version of who you are. And so, you know, it goes on there. And this for a while is all I had, but then I realized that there's something else going on, and I experience it here in the Midwest where people don't say what they really think. So it's about asserting yourself, self-assertion. And so people often confuse being assertive with being aggressive. That's not the same. I can be assertive. I can say what's true for me without impeding your ability to say or do what's true for you. Mm. But if I assume that who am I to ask for this, or who am I to make this claim, then we're being actually passive.
Right.
Passive is foregoing that which is rightfully yours. There's a book called Your Perfect Right, and it started in the 70s and it's been reprinted. And that's where I get this idea from, that assertiveness is between aggressive and passive. And aggressive is where I prevent you from having something that's rightfully yours. And passive is where I prevent myself from having what's rightfully mine. And assertive is where I say I pursue what's rightfully mine, but not in a way that diminishes your ability to pursue what's true for you. And I think this is a good mindset for people to really question themselves on, because I don't think we've ever been laid out these choices before, and there's a lot of confusion. And then there's even that passive aggressiveness, where I'm passive, I forgo what's rightfully mine, but then I resent the fact that you didn't forgo, and now I'm going to be like underhandedly aggressive towards you. I might undermine you or talk behind your back, or just, oh no, that's fine, you just do what you want to do because you're you, jerk, or whatever. And so It's like, wait a minute, but I asked you and you didn't say you wanted that or whatever. So, but I think these 4 things are the aspects of authenticity. And maybe I just pick one that I want to explore or work on, And so there's a lot just within these 4 things. And this is, to me, the heart of the authenticity chapter. So I talk about each one in turn. What is self-knowledge? How is it acquired? Let this be some dialogue that happens. So those questions, you could freeze it if you want to look at those for a minute. I just want to move on and be sensitive to time. Self-acceptance, some more questions. What does it look like? How do you define it? What is the relationship between accepting yourself and knowing yourself? What makes self-acceptance difficult? What increases self-acceptance? Can self-acceptance be a negative thing? And then I have a quote here: self-knowledge, all my study of happiness and habits brings me continually to the challenge of self-knowledge. It sounds so easy after all. I hang out with myself all day long, but it's tremendously challenging. Every day I remind myself to be Gretchen. This is from the author of The Happiness Project, Gretchen Rubin. To accept myself and then expect more from myself, which I think tees up nicely the next principle of self-development. So what does it mean? Is it easy or difficult? Who helps with self-development? I mean, when you're a child, you were raised to think, oh, other people are going to develop me. My development is in other people's hands, teachers, parents, blah, blah, blah. But then there's like this cold reality that you get into the real world and you're like, nobody else is really paying attention to me. No one else is telling me, advising me or, pointing out mistakes. They let it happen, When you see an area to develop, do you automatically jump on it? Do you hesitate? A friend of mine and I were talking last night, and she says, I have some life changes I want to make in regards to her fitness level. And she's like, I'm just afraid, like I have my habits and my comfort level. And, and we get so addicted to those that, you might say, oh, of course I should make this change. And especially we're still in January of the new year. And, all those people made those resolutions, and then, they never took action, or they didn't stay with it if they did a lot of the times. So anyway, what is the impact of leaders that do not develop themselves? What's the cost of a leader that isn't willing to look at themselves and be self-aware, be self-accepting, or even developing themselves? And you could ask it the other way. What is the impact for leaders that do demonstrate self-development?
I think you see that a lot when nonprofit organizations have weak or faulty boards. You see that we never think about developing ourselves in leadership positions, and then that takes a huge toll on those below you. So that just came to mind. Boards don't do enough of their own sort of professional development in their role around that leadership role.
I agree, and there's all sorts of opportunities for inauthenticity on boards, because these are high status people usually, and you want to present yourself as, I got my act together, and so I've been on boards where there's a lot of wealthy individuals there, and I'm not a person of extraordinary means, and so there is that sort of can't really be authentic. Or don't feel that way. And then but the discussions are richer when you have boards that are authentic with each other, and they can have those lively discussions, and people can say, I need help here, or I don't know enough about this. People get asked to be on boards all the time, and they say yes when they really didn't want to be on the board. They were in pretense. They were afraid of what would happen if they said no, so great stuff. And then the last one, self-assertion. What is it? And this is where you could talk about that model from Your Perfect Right, assertiveness, and then in the center, and then aggressiveness and passiveness on the other side. Very interesting discussion. I think participants would really like it. What does assertiveness have to do with leadership? When do you assert yourself, and when do you hold yourself back? That's another important kind of thought, too. There's some people that are so, they have so much energy that they dominate the room, but they don't know that they are. They don't have that self-awareness. I'm that person at times, maybe on this call even, I don't know. But how do those three principles relate to self-assertion? How does self-acceptance, self-knowledge, self-acceptance, and self-development relate to self-assertion? So really trying to weave it all together. There's just a lot you can do within this, Jennifer. There's just you can see how these conversations could really go in a lot of different directions. And that's the exciting thing about it. And that's why the dialogue approach is so good.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, well, yeah, here's the passive assertive aggressive model. So boom, you don't have to go get the book. You're perfect, right? Although I certainly would encourage it. But you know, there's a model and some discussion on it right there for you. Oh, by the way, we have a name for these little characters. My graphic designer and I, she designed these for me. It's not clip art or anything. They're called Oompas, like Oompa Loompas. You know, yeah, but they're just called Oompas. That was our code name for it when we were like, make this Oompa do that, or make that Oompa look like this, you know.
I like
So
that.
all these Oompas. What inhibits authenticity? So, you know, we don't really have time to get into these, but, you know, I'm just going to put them up there, and, you know, you could freeze the screen and you could read the chapter and see a little bit more about it, but bring your own stuff to this is the thing I encourage the most from everybody, you know. You don't have to facilitate or use the things in here. Draw from your experiences and, you know, things in your life, and encourage your participants to do the same. And that's really what this is about. It's about that shared experience of interacting in dialogue. So let me stop there. Jennifer, any thoughts, comments, questions? This
Already
was
that time, huh? No, this is a chapter where I find it's so easy for me to come up with so many stories of my own stories to bring in. And yeah, I don't know. This is going to be a fun one.
It should be. Yeah, and I'm just
I only have an hour to discuss it, and I think you could probably talk about it for 2 or 3.
And it's okay to leave people wanting more. So it's okay to leave people wanting more, you know. So that'll make it fun, you know. They'll make them look forward to the next time they get to talk about it. This is a really great model from Richard Boyatzis. I really like this as a self-development model. So this could be an exercise or activity for people to work on. This comes from the book Primal Leadership. So if people want more on this or want to research this, or if you wanted to turn this into like a homework exercise or something, feel free. And then I just recap, and then that's it. So do you feel like, yeah, right. So what we'll do is next month, we'll come back and hear how authenticity went, what you decided to do with it. Feel free if you want to, you know, still brainstorm with me in between. But I feel like we got a really good video here that gives people lots to think about and lots of tools and helps explain a lot of things. So any last words?
No, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
Good. I know you're going to do a great job again.
It's great. I mean, it's great. I think it's lining up perfectly too with our topic day of economic development.
Oh, great.
It's, you know, we're going to have some politicians in the room, and, you know, so I think interesting to hear how they respond to authenticity in their role. And yeah, it's matched up just perfectly, I think.
That's right. And always make sure, this is just a reminder, follow the capacities in order. They will match up with whatever your class day topic is. Just trust in that, especially your first year. And if you want to tinker with changing your class day topics around in order, feel free to play with that. But you got to the model itself really follows this flow. So we'll come back to the flow next time when we talk about purpose and hear about how authenticity went. Jennifer, thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. Bye-bye.
Bye.